When I was 10, my sister took me to the river to catch fish. That day, my sister drowned and was lost. It wasn't just my sister who died, but also the me who survived. When I was diagnosed with cancer, my mom was on the phone asking me for money. I stared at the diagnosis, struggling to control my emotions, listening to her venting on the phone by cursing me. She said it was all my fault that my sister died, and that my cousin Stella had been mentally unstable because she was so frightened. In the end, she even screamed, "Yolanda, someone like you is fine, but why is Stella always suffering?" I gripped my phone tightly, not knowing what to say. On the other end, she continued to cry and curse. I had cut off contact with them long ago, but maybe it was because Stella had fallen ill so many times that she found me again, only by finding me, a punching bag and blood bank. Could they survive? The words grew worse, and eventually, they turned into curses. She said that a person like me, so ungrateful, would never have a good death. In a daze, I felt like I had returned to those years. My heart, which had already fallen silent, was once again torn open, bleeding. Those facades I had covered up, the past I had deliberately ignored and forgotten, were being peeled away layer by her. Looking at the terminal cancer notice, listening to her words, tears filled my eyes. After hanging up, my phone received another message from her. "Yolanda, you'd better send the money soon. Stella is still in critical condition, and this is what you owe us." The word "owe" was like a needle, suddenly stabbing into my eyes. My mother said I owed her, but how could I repay this debt? She never said, as if it were endless, without a conclusion. When would it end? I stared at the diagnosis in my hand. I thought, maybe the end has finally arrived. When did my life truly fall into the abyss? It was the moment my sister fell. It was my birthday that day, and my sister said she would catch fish for me to celebrate. Back then, life wasn't good, and we hadn't eaten meat for a long time. I don't remember the specifics, just that the water was very cold. The sister who had been holding my hand tightly just a moment ago was swept away by the current. I kept calling out, trying everything to pull her back, but it was all in vain. By the time they pulled my sister out, she was already a cold corpse, and from that day on, my mother poured all her hatred onto me. She would strangle my neck and ask, "Are you that greedy? Why wasn't it you who died?" She would lose control and poke needles into my mouth, even saying that she would sew up my greedy mouth. I struggled violently, the needle pricking my lips, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. When I looked up at her eyes, bloodshot with rage, hatred surged in them. My struggles were meaningless under her grip. Fear, terror, and helplessness devoured me until my dad pushed her away. I fell to the ground, and my dad held my mom tightly, telling me to hurry and leave. Only then was I able to escape. I would rather give everything to go back to that afternoon, to stop my sister. I would even die in her place. But my sister will never come back. I want to tell her that I never want to eat fish again. The food I hate most in this life is fish. But she will never hear it again. The day after my sister was buried, my mother brought home a large fish. She didn't prepare it properly, just threw it into boiling water, and dragged me to the pot. She pried my mouth open and forced all the fish into it. "You liked it so much, didn't you? I'll let you eat your fill." The fishy smell filled my nose and mouth, and I couldn't even spit it out. When I couldn't swallow, she would poke me with chopsticks until the fish went down due to the reflex of my esophagus. But the fish bones got stuck in my throat, unable to go up or down. When my dad came home and asked what happened, my mom just sat beside me coldly and said, "She's just pretending to be pitiful again. Now there's no Nora around to help her, and she's still acting." I kept coughing beside them, and when my dad helped my mom into the house, he passed by me, looking at me with undisguised disgust, saying, "You've already made this home a mess. Can you just behave yourself from now on?" I stood there, unsure of what to say or even if I could say anything. It was my fault that my sister died. All of this was what I deserved. Later, every year on my birthday, my mother would buy a fish. She'd put it in front of me and say, "Eat it. You liked fish so much, didn't you? You took your sister's life. Aren't you happy now?" Every time I swallowed that fish, it felt as if it was stabbing into my stomach. I couldn't see fish. I couldn't think about fish. Even thinking about it would make me gag, shiver, and feel nauseous. It felt like there was always a thorn in my throat, and I would often cough uncontrollably. Every time I coughed, my mom would look at me with extreme disgust. she would call me disgusting, saying that I only knew how to act pitiful. That's why, whenever I saw anyone in this family, I couldn't cough. I desperately tried to suppress the urge, feeling as though countless ants were crawling in my throat. I couldn't control it. Coughing and the humiliation would often drown me. After swallowing those foul-smelling fish pieces, I could only wait until no one was around and then frantically scratch my throat. I would vomit until I was almost throwing up bile, but it still felt like I couldn't cleanse it. I was like those fish, reeking of rot, hated by everyone in this house. I was afraid of every approaching birthday. Even when it was close, I would start losing sleep, haunted by nightmares night after night. I would dream of being drowned by those blood-stained fish. With my mom watching from a distance, glaring at me and saying, "You liked fish, didn't you? Eat it, eat it." When I woke up, I felt suffocated, as if my throat was filled with fish bones. The air was thick with the smell of fish, and there was no way for me to retreat. I could only slowly be devoured by it. My sister was the one who treated me the best in this family. She was smart and beautiful. She would teach me how to write, wash my hair, and even braid my hair. I wasn't very smart, but she patiently helped me with every lesson. But now my sister is gone. On her birthday, I secretly drew a picture for her, where she was as kind and beautiful as ever. I wanted to tell her that I missed her so much and apologize for the words she never heard. I hid the drawing under my pillow and slept with it, just like the days when I used to sleep beside my sister. I even secretly kept one of her dresses, the one that still smelled like her. There were fewer and fewer things left from her. But they said that clothes of the deceased must be burned, or it would be bad. I couldn't stop them, so I carefully kept one of her favorite skirts, but my mom found it. She cut the skirt into tiny pieces in front of me, and I cried as I tried to stop her and begged her. But it was useless. I could only watch as the pieces of that skirt scattered across the floor. My mom seemed even more enraged. She dragged me to the river where my sister fell. She pushed my head into the water, saying, "Who are you pretending for? You killed my Nora. Aren't you satisfied?" The water choked my mouth and nose. I struggled violently, but suddenly I stopped. Maybe this way wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I could meet my sister again. But would my sister blame me, too? If she blamed me, that was fine, as long as I could see her. I miss her so much. Sister, I didn't know life would be so hard, that every day would be a struggle to get through. I'm afraid I'll live too long and meet you too late. I'm also afraid I won't be able to find you. But I wasn't lucky enough. The villagers passed by, pushed my mom away, and pulled me up. I was so close. I was so weak. I had been here so many times, but I never had enough courage to jump. Here's the translation of the text you provided into English. Dad said that my sister had died, and that Mom was also very sad, so I should be more understanding of her, until my cousin Stella moved in with us. Apparently, my uncle had hurt someone and was imprisoned, and my aunt had run away. Mom held Stella and said how pitiful she was. It was like she suddenly found a source of strength. My old room was given to Stella. Actually, I had already gotten used to it. Every summer vacation, Stella would stay at our house. The room that was supposed to be mine was actually occupied by her more often than not. Before my sister's accident, Stella had always lived with us, but after my sister's death, Stella seemed to be traumatized, often waking up crying in the middle of the night and causing a disturbance. That's why her mother had left. My sister's room was filled with photos. Mom made me stay in it. She said I should live there and look at my sister every day and think about how I had killed her. I looked at my sister every day and talked to her. I wished countless times that I had been the one to die. I wanted my sister to live more than anyone. I loved to draw. When I was young, I would draw everything I liked and show it to my sister. She said when I grew up, she would ask Mom to send me to art school. She said I would become a famous artist one day. I believed that. And I thought I would be like she said, a famous artist who would earn a lot of money for her. But that day would never come. My sister was gone. In this house, no one wanted me to draw anymore. Mom said we couldn't afford to raise a big artist, but Stella could. Mom said it was because Stella was sick and emotionally unstable, so drawing could help her feel better. So, Mom spent money to enroll her in a training class, and she could have sketchbooks and all sorts of beautiful paints. But she didn't seem to care much. The sketchbook and paints were carelessly thrown in a corner. I had two things I loved most in this world. One was my sister, the other was drawing. I couldn't help it. I picked up the sketchbook and paints Stella had thrown away. I hid in the backyard and secretly drew. I drew the sister I remembered. For the first time, I could paint her in color. Before that, I had only drawn her with a pencil. It was that painting that some people from the village saw. They praised my drawing, saying it was very good, and asked me to draw one for them too. They went to Mom and said I had such talent, I should be sent to a teacher to learn more. They also asked how Stella was doing in her art lessons and told her to show her work. Hearing those words caused Stella to snap. She smashed all the art supplies in the house and even used scissors to stab her hand. Blood was everywhere. She said she was stupid, not as smart as me, and that she had wasted Auntie's money. Mom held her in pain. I stood by the door. I met Mom's eyes, filled with hatred. I instinctively wanted to run away, but she grabbed my hair and dragged me back, her hand raised high, and she slapped me hard. The taste of blood filled my mouth, and my teeth were loosened. Another slap, and my ears rang with a loud buzz. I cried and tried to dodge, but it only angered her more. She brought scissors and tried to cut my hand. I struggled madly, trying to push her away to escape. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push her away. In an instant, the scissors pierced the tendon beside my thumb. The intense pain made my tears stream down my face. Finally, Mom had vented her anger. She said, "You like drawing so much, right? Then draw, draw. I'll make you draw, draw, draw." In my ears, the loud buzzing mixed with her sharp voice. The smell of blood was everywhere on the floor, and in a daze, I seemed to smell fish again. It felt like every day was torture, fear, and unease. I didn't know how to escape the situation, nor how to get out. It felt like I would never be able to get out. After that day, my right ear could only hear a little sound. I couldn't hold a pencil properly with my right hand. When I grew up, Mom would always say, "Do you want to blame me? Don't you know how bad Stella's condition is? Why do you still have to provoke her? You think I don't know you? You can't hide that little mind of yours." I didn't argue. It was already meaningless. The fact that I couldn't hear with one ear spread quickly throughout the village. The rumors spread like wild grass, and every day when Mom came back, her face was unusually grim. She said, "Are you happy now? Now everyone is pitying you, saying I abuse you. Are you happy now?" I didn't dare look at her, instinctively wanting to run away. Another slap came. Because of my ear problem, I was afraid that I might lose both ears. I instinctively covered my ears with my hands. My hand turned red from the slap. I was almost relieved that I had saved my other ear. Mom looked at me and seemed to remember something. Finally, the slap stopped. The ear that was already damaged felt very uncomfortable, and it often became infected. At night, when I lay in bed, I could hear a buzzing sound in my ear, and then I knew that yellow pus was going to leak out again. I hurriedly put a piece of paper under my ear. This feeling was hard to describe. My ear was always red, hot, and ulcerated, leaking pus. I was so scared, and I didn't know what else to do. I tried every method I could think of. I poured iodine inside to disinfect it, but every time it felt like it was burning. It still hurt, still itched, and still rotted. Finally, with no other idea, I stole Dad's white liquor and poured it in. The intense burning and stinging pain made me roll on the ground. When Mom came back, I begged her to take me to the doctor. She asked if I was doing it on purpose, if I was deliberately causing trouble and wasting her money, because she had just taken Stella to the hospital for her depression. To make her happy, Mom bought her new clothes, shoes, and a big doll. Mom said they didn't have much money left. I knelt on the ground, pulling on her pants leg, asking her to take me, but the pain had already overwhelmed me. And I just wanted to feel better. I even wished I could cut off the rotten ear. Tears blurred my vision, and I instinctively begged her, "Mom, please, I really can't stand it anymore. It hurts so much. Please, Mom, I'll pay you back. Please." I held my ear, curled up on the ground like a shrimp that had been scalded. Finally, Dad came back. He took me to the town clinic. The doctor took one look at my ear and didn't dare touch it. They told Dad to take me to the hospital right away. On the way there, Dad complained and asked why I hadn't told them earlier, but I had told them countless times. They always said I was pretending, that I was just trying to attract attention. The treatment wasn't complicated because that ear had already gone deaf. But when the doctor asked about the cause, I couldn't stop the tears. Dad asked me if I was doing it on purpose, pretending like this outside. He said Mom was right. I was calculating and liked to act pitiful. The medical expenses were over 1,000. It turns out that for 1,000, the pain wasn't so bad. I knew that every time Stella went to see a doctor for depression, and every time Mom bought her things, it was more than 1,000, but it couldn't be spent on me. I was the sinner in this family. Every penny spent on me was a waste. Perhaps it was because of the village gossip that my parents couldn't take it anymore. In my second year of middle school, they moved to the city, but I didn't know. One afternoon during the holiday, I nervously returned to that house. I found that the house had already been emptied. The neighbors told me that they had bought a house in the city to take care of my cousin Stella. I felt a little sad, but mostly relieved. I no longer had to face them every day, no longer had to feel the disparity in this house. If I were lucky, maybe my birthday this year would pass quietly, without having to swallow a fish that reeked of blood, but I had no money. So I could only go to the town to wash dishes in a restaurant during the holidays, earning a few dozen dollars each afternoon. They would let me take home any leftover food. I thought this kind of life was good enough. Then one day my dad called me, questioning me if I had no heart. The family had moved so long ago, and I hadn't even called once. I heard my mom's voice in the background. She's always like that, didn't you realize? Then my dad asked if I had enough money. They had been living in the new house for more than 2 months, and besides the $200 I had saved, and a bag of rice left at home, they hadn't given me a single penny. At school, I washed clothes for classmates, served meals, and did chores to exchange for food. When I was especially hungry, I ate my roommate's leftovers or ate a pack of instant noodles for the whole day. When my period came, I had to use toilet paper as pads until I found a cheap pack of sanitary napkins in a wholesale store for just $2 a piece. I finally didn't have to face the awkwardness of my period leaking onto my pants. Now my dad asked if I had enough money. There was nothing more ironic than this. I stayed silent, not answering. My dad grew more impatient. Same old story. You won't say a word no matter how many times we ask. You act like we haven't raised you all these years. My mom chimed in. Who knows where she's been getting all that dirty money from, pretending to be pitiful again. After that day, my dad sent me $800 through someone, and he gave me a comforting phone call. He said Stella was still not doing well, and with their 2-bedroom house, there was no extra room, so I should spend Christmas alone this year. I simply replied with, okay. The uncle who brought the money left the yard, and soon after, I overheard him chatting with a neighbor, saying that my parents were really cruel. They didn't want me to bring bad luck to their new house, so they didn't let me celebrate Christmas with them. My mom had been saying for years that I was a curse. She said I caused my sister's death, that I made Stella sick, and that even her own health was bad because of me. People in the village half believed it. They would pity me and give me things, but they didn't dare get too close. On Christmas night, there were many fireworks in the village, and the whole town was filled with the warmth and happiness of the holiday. I sat by the window, holding a bowl of noodles, with my sister's portrait on the chair across from me, but my hands kept shaking, and the drawing wasn't good. Tears fell into the soup, and the steam blurred my vision. Sister, I miss you so much. Just thinking about it makes me want to find you, but I don't have enough courage. The scars on my arms aren't deep enough. I'm afraid I won't die and they'll find out. Then it will be worse than death. My sister was very good at studying. She always cared about my grades when she was here. She said that we should keep studying so that we could go to bigger and better places. But I'm not as smart as my sister. Studying is hard for me. But now I have nothing left. I don't want to disappoint her. Besides thinking about how to spend less money on food every day, all my time went into studying. When I couldn't do well, I even couldn't help but pinch myself. I hated this body of mine. It wasn't like my sister's, not as smart, not as beautiful, but I didn't want to fail at studying and disappoint her. I spent each day struggling, but it got a little better each time, though progress was slow. At least for the high school entrance exams, I did okay. When my mom saw my grades, she just said, I didn't expect you to do okay. I knew that my cousin Stella's high school was a private school, paid with extra fees, but before I could feel any joy, my mom continued, I always thought she was pretending to be stupid. She's got more schemes than anyone else. She's smarter than all of us, the top 10, and she's all proud of it. If my Nora were still here, what would this score mean? I couldn't look at anyone anymore. Since my sister died, everything I do has been wrong. I hated myself. I just wanted to kill myself. High school was more intense, and I had less time to make money. As I grew older, I couldn't bring myself to beg for food anymore, not with any dignity. I could only try to save money. The buns I bought in the morning could last until lunch. Sometimes I didn't eat breakfast, and saved half of my lunch for dinner, while the school provided free water. When I couldn't bear the hunger, I drank water constantly. Then I met a classmate, Wade. He seemed to have money, and paid me to clean his desk. He also paid me to organize his notes. Every day, I served him lunch, and in return, I got one meal. The first month sitting next to Wade, my face had gotten much rounder. I rarely went back to that house. I stayed at school during the week. Every time I had to go back, it was just to sleep on the balcony. At night, the sound of mosquitoes made it hard to sleep, and my body was covered in bites, so I dreaded the holidays. I feared school breaks. When the break came, I had to go back to that house. At least at school, I had my own bed. At that house, I was just an outsider. Once, I forgot a book and went back to the house, only to see my mom spraying disinfectant where I had stayed. I couldn't remember my expression at the time, just the panic I felt. I ran away like I was escaping. That night, I lay in my dorm bed, repeatedly sniffing my clothes. I wondered if I smelled. No, it wasn't the smell, it was that I, to her, was just dirty. Wade was doing well in his studies, and I knew I had to keep doing well to stay seated next to him. I wanted to eat my fill, so I studied harder. My English wasn't good, but I didn't have money for tutoring. Luckily, Wade told me his math wasn't good either, so we decided to tutor each other. That period was the happiest time in my entire student life, but my luck was always bad. Stella's depression had gotten better, and my mom paid for her to repeat a year at the same school I was attending. That was the first time she came to school to find me. At the time, I was studying vocabulary with Wade under the sycamore tree on campus. He got one wrong, and I was flicking his forehead. That was our agreed-upon punishment. But my mom saw us. She stormed over and slapped me. It was the hardest slap I'd ever received. It wasn't just on my face, but on my dignity. At 17, Wade looked shocked and worried, wanting to touch the red, swollen side of my face, but when he saw my mom's terrifying gaze, he pulled his hand back. What followed was my mom once again trampling on my dignity. Her voice was so loud, it almost pierced through my only remaining good ear. She said, "I send you to school, and this is how you're seducing your male classmates." The words kept getting worse, the insults I was used to, but for Wade, someone who grew up in a warm and bright place, they were utterly incomprehensible. My dignity, and his, were slowly being stripped away in those insults. Along with our friendship, this incident reached Wade's mom. She loved him very much and was very graceful. She just contacted the teacher and asked my mom to apologize to her son. If my mom had gone, I didn't know what would have happened to me. Luckily, Wade was kind enough, just like he had helped me so many times before. He stopped his mom, but we were no longer seated together. Our gazes never met again. And I thought about it over and over for a long time. In the end, I could only write a note to him that said, "Sorry," and he simply replied, "Study hard." Without the rewards from Wade, I was back to the days of hunger, and my mother gave me even less money. She said the family's expenses were too high, and just Stella's medical bills cost at least $2,000 a month. I knew there were even more costs, Stella's living expenses. For example, when she came to school, all her meals were from outside restaurants because her appetite was poor and she couldn't get used to the food in the school cafeteria. Also, because of her illness, she had fallen behind in her studies. The tutoring fees were a big burden too. Whenever my mother did give me money, her eyes were filled with sarcasm. "Aren't you the one who can earn money yourself? Why do you still need mine? It's truly shameful to beg from others." Fortunately, the school cafeteria was hiring part-time workers, and my class teacher, knowing my situation, secretly arranged for a subsidy for me. I was really happy at the time, thinking that I could make it through and go to university, to the bigger and better place my sister had dreamed of. But in my third year of high school, Stella swallowed a huge amount of pills, and by the time she was found, she had already lost consciousness. During the rescue, many of her organs failed. She lay in the ICU for over 10 days, draining my parents' savings and leaving them with a huge debt. My mother kneeled before me, begging, "Please, please spare us, I beg you." I was used to her always shifting the blame onto me, but I never expected this time to be the same. Finally, she told me what she truly thought. She wanted me to quit school and go work in a factory. I was silent, not responding. I didn't want to agree. I wanted to escape, to climb out of this swamp-like life. But she knelt before me, holding my sister's photo. Begging me to pity her, she said I had killed Nora. If Nora were still here, none of this would have happened. She said this family was like this because of me. A huge feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me, and I knew I would never escape this swamp. When I went to school to withdraw, Wade came to find me. It was the first time he spoke to me since we stopped being desk partners. He was still as kind as I had always known him to be. Back in middle school, his math grades were the best in his class. For someone like me, he had always protected my dignity. He asked me if it was about money, and said his family could sponsor me. I shook my head and sincerely said, "Wade, you are truly a good person." He stayed silent. I said again, "Wade, I'm sorry, I made you embarrassed with me. Why don't you keep going? You've come so far." He asked stubbornly, even a little angry. "There's no reason, I'm just tired," I replied. And his face grew darker. "If a person won't save themselves, don't blame fate," he said, and then turned to leave. I looked at his back and, in that moment, I realized I was already crying as he walked away. Wade had always been different from me. His moral standards were so high, and he had always protected me, but I suddenly wasn't sure anymore. Maybe now, he thought poorly of me too. It didn't matter. Wade, I have always looked down on myself. I've always looked down on myself. After leaving school, I lived like a walking corpse. I entered a factory, working non-stop. It seemed like, from the moment I left school, I had separated myself from everyone else, entering a world of my own. I had only an old phone that my father didn't want, and I didn't have Wade's contact information, just the number of a close roommate from school. I saw his figure in the graduation photo, so vibrant and full of life, but I didn't have time to envy him. Every day, it was just the assembly line in the dormitory. The factory was arranged by my mother, and most of my wages were taken by her. I hated myself like this. I felt like a tamed slave, a dog who obeyed instinctively, until one day, a girl who had grown up in an orphanage talked to me about how the government supported them. She said that as long as they were willing to study, they could get around $1,000 a month for living expenses while attending university. That's when I truly felt so sad. It turns out that being an orphan was better than being a person like me. The orphanage sometimes even had birthday cakes on their birthdays, but my birthday was just another tool my mother used to abuse me. I didn't know when this life would end. When I turned 20, one of my roommates secretly bought a lot of things for my birthday. I cried so miserably that day. I suddenly felt like I couldn't go on like this anymore, but I still didn't dare face my so-called family. My biggest courage came when my friends helped me escape to another factory in another city, cutting off all contact. I didn't know if they had looked for me, but none of that mattered anymore. The new life felt like the light breaking through the damp, dark swamp. I had so many firsts, eating in restaurants, eating KFC, McDonald's, and ordering takeout for myself. I bought new clothes. Sometimes I would feel a little dazed. It turned out that this life didn't even cost that much. Later, I saved up money and took the university entrance exam. I graduated and got a job at a small company. I even rented a small room, and by the time I was 24, I finally had my own little nest. I grew a few plants on the small balcony outside my room. If I could, I wanted to save more money to rent a bigger place. And maybe one day I could even buy my own house. Everything was going in a good direction. The company boss even introduced me to a partner. I didn't expect it to be Wade. I nervously said, "What a coincidence." But he just calmly replied, "It's not a coincidence. I knew it was you." At 24, I reunited with Wade. It took me 7 years to finally sit with him and drink coffee, calmly looking at him. But all of this came to an abrupt halt on my 25th birthday, on an ordinary day. I went for a checkup, and by the time they found out, it was already too late. It was from the cheap sanitary napkins I had used before to save money. Our first and last date happened on the same day. I bought a dress I had never been able to afford before. At the sunset by the sea, the sky was full of rosy clouds. He stood there holding a large bouquet of flowers. Even the sea breeze blowing through his hair was gentle. We ate cake together, and he talked about how he wanted to spend every birthday with me. But I didn't have a future. I guessed he was going to confess. And logically, I should have rejected him earlier, but I still wanted to hear it. He had never been good with words, but this time, he spoke about many moments we had shared in school. We embraced under the fireworks at night, My body had already started bleeding, and the cancer had spread to other organs, so, I was wearing adult diapers. I leaned on his shoulder, as he was still imagining our future together. What kind of house we would live in and how we would decorate it. I interrupted him. I didn't hide anything. When you're facing the end with little time left, you become extremely selfish. But this day of love was enough. The salty sea breeze kept blowing, and I could smell the special ink scent from his body. Wade had studied calligraphy for many years and wrote beautiful characters. I reached out and hugged him, holding back my tears as I whispered, "Wade, thank you for loving someone like me." He frowned after hearing this. I knew what he wanted to say, but I didn't want to hear it. His lips were so beautiful. I pressed his shoulder and kissed him. My warm, bright youth had grown into a broad-shouldered man, but I couldn't be greedy anymore. He had helped me so much, and I shouldn't keep taking advantage of him. If a person isn't very lucky, then many aspects of their life will not be fortunate either. A few days after my diagnosis, my mother found me. I thought that after I escaped at 20, we hadn't seen each other for over 4 years, and that we probably would never meet again. But unexpectedly, Stella's mental state had not been good all these years. My mother was very worried about her, fearing that no one would take care of her after she and my father were gone, and at this moment, she finally thought of me. She wanted me to take care of Stella for the rest of her life. But unfortunately, she will never get her wish. My life is about to end. When I was in the hospital for tests, she called me asking for money. She said it was what I owed her. She started talking about my sister again. For the first time, I answered her question directly. My sister wasn't killed by me. I was just a primary school student back then, and as her guardian, you were more responsible. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she stammered, What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," I replied calmly. After all these years, I was no longer the mentally unwell little girl. I had begun to clearly realize that they couldn't accept my sister's death, but they also couldn't blame themselves. The only way they could cope was by abusing me, to convince themselves they weren't wrong. "All right, it's my fault. I should die. You'll be happy if I die," the voice on the phone continued. I suddenly felt disgusted and nauseous. Look at that. A person can't choose how they're born. The random distribution of fate made me part of this family, and thus began this bitter life. I hung up the phone and blocked her number. She had already found out where I rented my place. But it didn't matter. I couldn't die in my landlord's house. I was still thinking about how to die without causing trouble for anyone. I returned the apartment. I went to a sanatorium by the sea, where I truthfully told them my condition. I repeatedly confirmed with them, "Is it okay if I die here? Sorry, I may not have much time left, and I hope I won't cause you any trouble." While I was communicating with the receptionist, I looked up and met Wade's eyes. My eyesight wasn't very good, and things were often blurry, but for some reason, seeing his eyes made me feel so sad. At first, I thought it didn't matter. At least, I couldn't lose control of my emotions in front of others and cry. But the moment he appeared, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears started streaming down uncontrollably. I kept wiping my eyes and turned around to continue with the admission process. Sorry, I didn't mean to." Wade came over and pulled me into his arms. The sanatorium didn't work out, and Wade took me with him. He asked me why I wasn't going to live my last days properly. He asked where I wanted to go the most, and I said the beach. I thought carefully. There wasn't really anywhere in my life that was worth it, but strangely, in these days, I often thought of that sunset. Greedily looking at the way he held the flowers, I suddenly felt like dying here wouldn't be so bad. It just so happened that Wade had a house here. During the day, we would ride bikes around the park near the beach, most of the time with him carrying me on the bike, but I was often exhausted and would fall asleep. Sometimes, I'd sit on the beach for an entire afternoon. He would also lean next to me, we'd chat casually, and I would watch the seagulls circle over the sea. Suddenly, I asked as if I had just thought of something. "Do you think people have a next life?" "I don't know, but I hope so. But I don't really want one. I don't want to be a person in my next life." "What would you want to be, then?" "I want to become dust, nothingness, and have nothing to do with anyone. Being a person is so exhausting." He suddenly fell silent, then pulled me closer to him and said, "Then I'll become a grain of dust too. I'll be the one beside you, a grain of dust that has nothing to do with you, but still with you. Why, I'm afraid even dust would be lonely." Epilogue. Yolanda's last days grew increasingly difficult. she had trouble eating, and Wade could only make her meals in various ways, transforming from a kitchen disaster into someone who could rival a professional chef. Yolanda understood his intentions, so she tried her best to eat, but her deteriorating body couldn't bear it, and she often made excuses to send him away, only to secretly vomit, until Wade found out. She thought he would be angry, but surprisingly, Wade changed. In front of her, he became almost the kindest person on earth. He treated her like a child, soothing her with patience. He calmly explained things to her, never raising his voice, never showing any anger, just repeatedly emphasizing that she should take care of herself in whatever way made her most comfortable. Yolanda felt that she had also changed. She became someone who cried easily. Although he never blamed her, the tears still came uncontrollably. Over time, she began to understand her own psychology. Having never been loved before, suddenly being loved so tenderly, her tears were the first to feel it before her heart did. Her right hand still trembled easily, but one day, she picked up a paintbrush. She painted many pictures of Wade and her sister. She talked to him about her sister. Wade was a good listener. He never interrupted her once, but when he heard about the injury to her hand, his clenched fist under his sleeve betrayed him. He couldn't imagine the kind of life his beloved had lived, and he couldn't fathom the kind of person who could be so cruel to their own child. Yolanda leaned on his shoulder, suddenly feeling his tense body in the tight grip of his fists. She reached out with both hands and held his hands, feeling a strange but not entirely bad sensation. To be cared for was such a wonderful feeling. She looked up at him, as though with a paintbrush, slowly painting him into her heart. Almost instinctively, she said, "Wade, I suddenly feel like maybe I can still be a person in my next life. But will you still appear?" He looked at her, sincerely kissed her forehead, and promised her. Of course, these brief days weren't all good. For example, one afternoon, Yolanda received a phone call that caused her emotions to collapse once again. It was from her father. "Yolanda, are you okay?" Yolanda held the phone without responding. She found his concern disgusting. Her father was just as cruel to her. His indifferent observation was the greatest accomplice. "Yolanda, can you say something? Are you asking for money?" Yolanda lay in a chair, basking in the sun. "No, no. I just wanted to ask if you're coming back for Christmas this year. It's been so long since our family has had a reunion," the man said cautiously. Yolanda had once seen a quote online that said only parents who had treated their children badly feared their children. She wondered if her father's behavior now was because of that. "You all said I'm a curse. Aren't you afraid I'll curse you?" she mocked. On the other end of the line, he quickly apologized and explained, citing Stella's bad condition back then. Yolanda was so annoyed that she interrupted him. "Enough, I don't want to hear it. Isn't this your family's problem? You don't need to explain it to me." After she said that, she couldn't hold back a coughing fit. "Yolanda, what's wrong with your health?" her father asked, his voice full of concern for the first time. But Yolanda only felt disgusted. She didn't hide anything from him, and sarcastically said, "I'm about to die. You can tell your family. Maybe it'll cheer you all up." "Yolanda, what are you doing? You can't curse yourself like that," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Yolanda suddenly couldn't bring herself to yell anymore. It wasn't because she had softened, she just felt overwhelmingly exhausted. "Dad, you really don't need money, right?" she asked again. "I don't want it. I'm sorry, Yolanda, but I can't forgive you. But there's one thing I want to ask." "Okay, what is it?" "Please don't look for me anymore. Don't contact me or your family. If possible, don't meet me in the next life either." Her father didn't respond. The uncontrollable sound of crying came through the phone. "Just thinking about you all makes me hurt so much. The only thing I'm thankful for is that this life is almost over. So please, if there is a next life, can you stay far away from me?" "Yolanda, Yolanda, what's happening to you?" His frantic calls echoed from the phone. Yolanda tiredly hung up the phone, tears in her eyes, and drifted into a deep sleep. "Wade, Wade." Wade came back from buying groceries and heard her calling his name. She seemed to be dreaming, crying heavily. He slowly approached her and finally heard her clearly call, "Wade, save me, Wade, save me." She had had countless nightmares of being beaten and abused. Maybe that phone call had pushed her emotions over the edge, and she was reliving one of those nightmares. But this time, she screamed out loud. She was no longer that helpless child from many years ago, silently enduring. Instead, she frantically called his name. He held her tightly, whispering in her ear, I'm here, Yolanda, I'm here. It's over now, no one will hurt you again." She finally opened her eyes, met his tear-filled gaze, and reached out to wipe away his tears. Then, she threw herself into his arms and cried, "Wade, Wade, Wade." She called his name again and again, then, she buried her face in his chest. Her tears soaking his shirt, in a very soft voice, barely above a whisper, she said, "Wade, I'm not afraid anymore." He heard it clearly. As Yolanda's mental state deteriorated, she sometimes couldn't even recognize Wade. She clung to him, asking him to buy her practice books. He asked why, and she said her brain wasn't very smart, so she had to work harder and do well in school. Wade humored her, and really bought the books for her. She looked at him with a distressed expression and said, "I have to study hard, or I won't be able to sit with Wade in class." In her mind, Wade was the best person, who would tutor her and feed her. When Wade heard her say that, he couldn't hold back his tears. He turned away from her and wiped them away. He didn't just blame her parents, he blamed himself too. If only he had been a little more patient back then, they wouldn't have lost contact for so many years. After the college entrance exam, he had tried to find her, but she was gone. One day, she sat in the sunset and drew a picture of Wade playing basketball back in high school. Her mind was a bit fuzzy, and after finishing the drawing, she looked at the picture and then at him. Then, she sincerely said, "You look just like him." Wade touched his face, looked at the boy in the drawing, and agreed, "Yeah, it's such a coincidence." She suddenly took the drawing down and hid it in her chest, saying, "Don't tell anyone, okay?" "Why?" "Because if they know, I'm afraid he'll be embarrassed." Her eyes were red-rimmed, and the youthful insecurity and self-loathing seemed to have passed through the years and settled back into 25-year-old Yolanda. And at that moment, he finally understood the bitter sadness that had once lingered on the corner of her mouth. Epilogue. Yolanda had moments of clarity, though they were increasingly rare. During these times, she would often feel anxious and ask Wade if he smelled blood. She constantly feared there was a fishbone stuck in her throat and that her whole body smelled foul. The bleeding from her body became more frequent, and she felt as though her body was rotting more each day. She dared not embrace him anymore, and the frequency of her vomiting increased. Eventually, she couldn't even stand up, and Wade had to help her with adult diapers. She became furious, crying as she pushed him away. Wade, helpless, stood by her side, watching her cry harder, pleading, "Wade, please, please, leave me alone." He could only silently turn and close the door behind him. Then, he leaned weakly against the door, wishing that, if he could, he would take her suffering upon himself. Somehow, Yolanda mustered the strength to change herself. She knew she couldn't delay it any longer. She had once considered going to a hospice, where they said she could die in peace, but when she looked in the mirror at her own reflection, she couldn't bring herself to go through with it. Unwilling to subject herself to more humiliation, that day, for the first time in a long while, she felt better. Wade pushed her in her wheelchair, and they walked for what felt like hours. They talked about many things, and Yolanda even drew him a picture of a sunset by the sea. That night, they slept in each other's arms, but when Wade woke up, Yolanda was gone. The empty house felt as if everything had been a dream. Beside her absence was a note she left behind. She asked him not to blame himself, saying she was content and happy to leave. She could no longer accept the person she was becoming and had chosen to jump into the sea. Next to the note was a drawing of a 17-year-old Wade, full of vitality. The warm sunlight shone on the boy she had loved most. In the final moments of her life, they had reunited, and she felt that this was the final act of kindness from fate. It was enough now. She couldn't be greedy. She feared that when he remembered her, it would only be the painful parts, and she didn't want to frighten him. So, she chose this way to leave. Yolanda's mother suddenly had a dream. In it, her deceased eldest daughter stared at her with bloodshot eyes and said, "Mom, is this how you treated Yolanda, Mom? Do you really think Yolanda caused my death? Mom, how can a person like you be our mother?" She screamed at her in agony. The woman woke up in horror, frantically dialing Yolanda's number, one call after another. She even used Stella's phone to try, but no one answered on the other end. A wave of intense fear surrounded her, and she felt panic like never before. After a great deal of effort, they finally managed to contact Wade. At that moment, Wade was in the mountains, distributing sanitary pads to girls in need. providing 10 years worth of free pads for the girls in that area. Yolanda's mother cautiously asked him, "Where is Yolanda?" "She's dead," Wade answered calmly. What? How did she die?" The woman seemed unable to believe it. She kept muttering, "How could she die? She was so young," normally gentle. Wade was now overwhelmed by a rising bitterness in his heart. He deliberately said, half intentionally and half unintentionally, "Haha, so young. Wasn't she already dying from the years of abuse you subjected her to? Do you know how she died? How could a mother, who makes her child suffer even during their period, treat them like that? Do you remember the cheap pads she used, the ones that cost a few cents per pack? Would you even use those?" He questioned her harshly, his veins bulging on his forehead. The woman collapsed to the floor, her face full of terror, and crawled toward him, crying, "Where is she? Where is she now? Please tell me." Wade only looked at her with disgust and then drove off. She called out behind his car, while Yolanda's father stood motionless beside her. The woman, frantic, started to hit the man, but suddenly, he slapped her to the ground. It was the first time in their marriage that he had ever struck her. Shocked and hurt, the woman looked up at him. Yolanda's father merely closed his eyes and said, "Enough. She said that just thinking about us made her suffer. Stop disturbing her anymore." "No. I'm her mother. I gave birth to her." The woman muttered to herself in disbelief. Stella, upon hearing of Yolanda's death, completely lost her mind. She wandered around, clutching a notebook, constantly repeating, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Yolanda's mother instinctively snatched the notebook from her and found that it was the diary of her deceased eldest daughter, Nora. She locked herself in her room, flipping through the pages one by one, and then she found the truth she had never been willing to accept. November 1st, 2004. "I need to save money to send my sister to art school. Mom doesn't love us." "It's okay. I love my sister." November 20th, 2004. "Mom gave the family's money to Stella's family again. It seems like this house isn't for me and my sister. It's for her. It's okay. I'll grow up and make money, and then I'll give my sister and me a home." October 18th, 2005. "It's my sister's birthday. I want to catch a fish for her. My sister is getting thinner. When will I have money? I want to buy her a whole house full of food. At least I have my sister, and she has me." Yolanda's mother, in the end, could barely bring herself to look at the truth. The facts she had been deliberately deceiving herself about were now cruelly laid bare before her eyes. The truth about Nora's death. The real culprit was actually her, but she had never dared to admit it. In the past, she had helped her brother's family, which led to her two daughters being neglected and even suffering from material deprivation, but she couldn't bring herself to accept that she had been such a mother. She chose the most immoral course of action, shifting all the blame onto little Yolanda. Stella's mental breakdown stemmed from the fear that the tragedy of Nora's death might be linked to her. Under this immense psychological pressure, she chose to escape and hide. It wasn't until Yolanda's death that the truth completely shattered her. Yolanda's mother tried to hide the diary, but it was spotted by Yolanda's father. The woman, in panic, tried to hide it, but this time the man was unusually forceful. He snatched the diary from her and began to read. The woman dared not look at him. He cried and laughed at the same time, until he saw her, trembling, not daring to look at him. He suddenly understood. She wasn't truly feeling guilty. She was just afraid of people knowing the truth. No law in this world could punish her now. He felt a deep sense of unfairness. But he himself was also one of the killers. Christmas came, and outside, the streets were full of lights and festive cheer. The three of them sat at a table, the atmosphere strangely eerie. He vaguely remembered past Christmases, how cruel they had been to Yolanda. He raised a glass and clinked it with theirs. After they all drank, he said, "The last Christmas. Let's wish ourselves to hell." Stella, still madly playing with her dolls, seemed not to have heard, but before long, she started complaining of a stomach ache. The woman seemed to sense something and desperately tried to run out. The man reached out and grabbed her, saying, "Don't be afraid. I'll die with you, Yolanda. I'm sorry, don't be scared. Dad will watch over them. I won't let anyone disturb you again." Wade became obsessed with painting, but the things he painted were strange. He could only draw the dust by the seaside. Sometimes, he would touch the dust on his canvas and ask, "How about being dust? Then don't be afraid. Wait a little longer, and soon, there will be another piece of dust beside you. Two pieces of dust together aren't so lonely." After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you liked our video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share our channel. See you next time.